Hi everyone, welcome to another Scott's RPG review. It's been a while. I went on vacation and then had real life intervene. Hate to say real life, but I had work to do and everything. But I'm back to doing reviews, and I wanted to do a review today of Cyberpunk Red by Telesorian Games. This is their 2020 version of their Cyberpunk RPG. I'm a huge Cyberpunk fan, from Blade Runner to Harlan Ellison stuff to Neil Stephenson stuff. I love the cyberpunk genre, and I'm always on the lookout for an RPG that does cyberpunk well. Free League Publishing does the Blade Runner game, but it's very specific. It's a cyberpunk universe, but the characters are all detectives, or in their new version that's coming out, you can make replicants. So it's not really a full cyberpunk RPG in the way I think about it. And Cyberpunk Red is. So let's talk about the game. The book is about 450 pages long, and it includes everything you need to play the game. So it's not like you need a player's guide, a GM's guide, and all that. Now, I would recommend that everybody who play it either get the PDF version, or if you're a GM, printed version, definitely want to get them. But it's one book that contains everything, which is really nice. I like that. Now, let's talk about the structure of the book, what I like about it, what I don't like about it, and then let's talk about the game itself, the mechanics, and and then the genre and what I think about that as well. So, the book starts with a brief primer on RPG in the Cyberpunk universe, only about 26 pages long, which is good. I did a review of some other materials, and I said that like the Dune one, I think I was like 200 pages in before I got into character creation mechanics. I was like, holy Toledo, guys. I'm not going to read 200 pages. Now, it's the Dune universe, and I understand why they did that, but I felt like it was a lot of upfront stuff before you got into the actual meat of the game. Here's 27 pages, and then they talk about character creation. And they have three ways you can create characters. You can take some templates, which is very simple and straightforward. Then you got a middle of the road where you take a template and you modify it, and then you got to build from the ground up. I think that's really important in this game, and I'll talk about why when we get into the mechanics, because the characters are really complicated. And so I like the fact of the three types. And then they get into stats and skills, weapons and armors and outfits. So right out within the first 100 pages, you've got all the stuff that you need to build a character. Then it kind of interestingly goes from character creation into some background discussion where it talks about cyberpsychosis, which is kind of an interesting humanity issue mechanic that you have to deal with in game. And then it goes back from there into mechanics. It talks about how the mechanics work. And it's actually pretty straightforward. I think once you realize that it's not as bad as I think. It's basically a stat plus a skill plus a die 10. You add those two together. Everything you do has a difficulty value. You have to exceed the difficulty value. And you win. Tens are successes. Ones are automatic failures. Pretty typical stuff. And then they talk about combat and how it works. And their combat explanation is about 30 pages long, so we're now into about page 200. And it's all really good. They then go from there to net running, which talks about specifically the net and how it works. And then wound management and injuries, because this is a deadly RPG in terms of the amount of damage people take. And they talk about how healing works and everything. And that's the first 230 pages. So about the first half of the book gets you so you've got all your core mechanics in place. Then everything from about 230 page forward is genre and background. They go through the alternative history that this universe is in, because it's actually kind of set in about 10 years ahead from when it was written, about 15 years from when it was written. And they did some major changes to history to make it work well. And then everything from that is history, background, economy, and all that stuff. And then you got character sheets and stuff at the end. So all really good. So book's really well structured, I thought. One of the nice things I like about it is I've noticed a general tendency in cyberpunk genre RPGs, the books. They play with weird fonts, they play with weird pictures, they make it really hard to read. This is really easy to read. Yes, it does have some kind of interesting font play in it, but at least it's readable. There was one I read, I can't remember which one it was. It wasn't New York Bork, but it was something by Free League where I said, this is unreadable. I don't even know how to play this game because the book was so bad. This is pretty straightforward. So that's the book. Now, let's go from there to, I want to talk a little bit about the stats and mechanics. When I first read this and I read the stats, I will tell you I was completely overwhelmed. Now, I've been doing a lot of Cypher System and Numenera and Free League Publishing, where your stats are relatively short. In Numenera and Cypher System, it's 3, and then you have skills and abilities. Here, your core stats, there are 10 of them. I thought that was an awful lot, and I'm still not convinced they really needed to break it down so much, but they did. And I think that's one of the reasons why the character creation process, having 3 tiers, is so important. Because with these 10 stats, if you were to try to build a character manually from the ground up your first time and spending your points and all that kind of stuff, it's very tough. But they actually make it, with the templates and then the automatic builds and everything, the 10 core stats, still a lot, I think. And the skills, there are so many of them, which you'd expect in a cyberpunk universe. It's really, really, it's really tough to kind of absorb it from the ground up. So when I go to run this, I'm likely going to suggest to all my players, look, take one of the templates or take these kind of middle of the road things. Don't build a character from the ground up. It's a lot of work. The biotech stuff in the game is really interesting. It's a little complicated and you have to get used to it because you've got cost plus slots and you have to buy something and then you typically had to have slots which you put stuff in it. So a little complicated. Probably not good for your beginner RPGer probably, but still pretty good. And again, if you use these templates, you can get around that by not having them to figure out, well, okay, I've got the ARM thing, and it's got 3 slots, and if I want this, it's got these slots, and I've got programs and mechanics. It's a lot to absorb. Now, the universe is in an alternative future, and then it's got net running in it, which is typically a very common feature inside the cyberpunk genres, this concept of, quote, the net. I'll be honest and tell you, I haven't played this, but from what I read, I'm kind of disappointed the direction they took this. I thought about it a lot. I said, wow, this is really dumb. And then I said, well, you know what? I get why they did it. I want to play it and see how it works. Now, here's where the difference is in their history, you have the classic cyberpunk net like we think of it from movies like Hackers and Diamond Age and other things. But that net crashed in the history, and a new kind of net was built, and it's an augmented, it's really, when I thought about it, it's an augmented reality. So what you have is when you connect to the net, you're still acting in what they refer to as meat space, the physical world, but there's a reality, a net reality that overlays it. And clearly, this whole augmented reality that's so popular with the Apple glasses and all the other stuff, and the Google Glass and the Amazon's got a set, this augmented reality seems to be the direction things are going. And I think Cyberpunk Red is an attempt to take that trend that they saw coming. Now, this was written 4 years ago, so I have to give them some points for seeing that this might be the direction things are going. But it's not, for me, that classic net the way I think of in the cyberpunk genre, which is its own universe. It's an augmented reality overlay. Don't know how I feel about that. We're going to see when I start to run it how well that works. So that is net running and how it works. Short review, but what do I think? All in all, I think this is probably one of the, other than the question of the type of net, I think it's one of the best written, and this is what people say, one of the best written cyberpunk books I've seen. The mechanics are good, the mechanics are solid, they're complicated. Not sure in this particular genre, if you're doing broad-based RPGs, whether it doesn't have to be complicated, because you have to allow for a lot of things. I'm definitely going to run it at some point. I got to figure out a set of players that want to get into those level of mechanics. They're very from my perspective and my player base, they're very heavy mechanically driven. They're not like Rollmaster level heavy or Palladium level heavy. Those are some very old 1970s and 80s RPGs, fantasy RPGs, that were very, very mechanically heavy. It's not even as heavy as Traveler. Interestingly, by the way, Traveler I do not consider to be a cyberpunk. It's a science fiction genre thing. It's very different. So, if you're getting into this, just be aware as the mechanics may be heavier than what you're used to, particularly if you come from the worlds of 5e. This definitely leans more towards kind of the Pathfinder or higher level of mechanics. Be aware that the net architecture is very different from what we've classically thought about in terms of cyberpunk, but it might be interesting and might be worth a try. I would definitely watch, and I'm going to definitely watch, a couple of playthroughs to see how on YouTube, see how this works out, see how this whole net thing runs out. Other than that, good book, well constructed, well written. Structurally, I think it's one of the better RPG books I've seen around lately, particularly for this genre. Other than that, everyone have a good day, and we will see you in my next review.